Episode 16, The Shadow Between Stalls. The market dressed itself in ordinary that night and almost got away with it. Lanterns burned the right shade of gold. Steam drifted from pastry trays with the right scent of sugared spice. A violinist on a balcony drew a song that curled like silk and never snagged. Liora walked with Aunt Faye and Elias through the weave of it, trying to let the rhythm smooth the harsh place inside her ribs. It lasted 3 streets. At the 4th, something was misbuttoned. The stall of ribbons had pinned itself wrong. Colors ran backward, from dull to bright, as if the world had been put on in a rush. The baker's sign hung mirrored, letters correct only if you read them in the reflection of a teapot. A spice merchant's jars stood in perfect rows, but every label was the next jar's name. People bought pepper by asking for salt, and the merchant nodded as if that were the most natural bargain in the world. "Keep walking," Elias said. He didn't slow. "Don't correct it." "Why?" Liora asked. "Because the market's listening for who notices." They crossed into a quieter artery where awnings drooped low and lanterns wore hoods of blue gauze. The air felt thick, not heavy like storm air, heavy like water. Liora swallowed and heard the sound travel too slowly in her own throat. A stall of masks waited on their left. Each mask was cut from shadow cloth and shaped into a face that should have been familiar. Eyes, cheeks, a mouth, but each part floated an inch from where it belonged, as if memory had been badly translated. She reached without meaning to, then snatched her hand back. Faye's staff clicked once. "Hands in pockets," she said, mild as a lullaby and just as binding. "Look, don't touch." Liora obeyed. The coin lay cool against her palm, a rare relief. If it was plotting, it plotted quietly. They turned again. The lane narrowed, then widened in that trick of market streets which made every distance suspect. A curtain lifted where there hadn't been a doorway. A boy darted out and nearly crashed into Liora. Fox ears, quick grin, the same child who had called her Lantern Heart from a human tower. He tipped 2 fingers to his brow. "Mind your shine," he said, conspiratorial. "It draws maps for things that can't read." "Maps?" Liora echoed. He pointed at her chest. "You glow." Then he leaned around her and peered at Elias with frank curiosity that made Elias look away. "You, though, you're written." The boy's grin dimmed. "And the writing's not yours." Faye stepped between them with a rustle of skirts that said a conversation had ended. "Off with you," she said gently. "Go trouble a juggler." The child flipped backward into the crowd and vanished like an idea someone chose not to think. "What did he mean?" Liora asked. "Written?" Elias's mouth made a shape that wasn't an answer. "Keep moving." They passed a woman selling wind nuts, strings with invisible breezes tied into them. Liora watched the buyer pull a knot loose and feel winter roll over his face. The seller winked at Liora as if they shared some secret she didn't know yet. Farther on, a hawker balanced a tray of glass thimbles filled with light. "Borrowed dawns," he cried. "Return with only slight wear." The borrowed dawn in one thimble flickered, then went out. No one remarked on it. Liora tried to make the world simple. Left foot, right foot. Elias's shoulder a pace ahead. Faye's staff counting stone. The coin a cool circle in her hand. It almost worked, until they reached the seam where 2 streets met and misremembered how to share a corner. Shadows pooled there. Not deep, not dramatic, just more shadow than the lamps could justify. They lay like spilled ink around a pair of unremarkable chairs facing each other across a narrow table. No merchant, no wares, only the invitation of 2 empty seats. "Do we go around?" Liora asked. Faye didn't answer. She was looking elsewhere, as if the market had spoken in a language only she heard. Elias's hand went to his blade and stayed there, not drawing. "We go through," he said, slowly. Liora stepped to the left, giving the chairs wide berth. The shadow followed, softly, like water does. She stopped, it stopped. She backed away, it came with her, indifferent to the lamps. Elias shifted to block her. The shadow curled around his boot, curious. It didn't cling, not yet. It learned his weight, matched the angle of his stance, then stretched too far for the lamp behind him to have cast it, like a rumor trying the shape of a man. "Elias," she said, very soft. "I see it," he said, even softer. The coin warmed, not a flare, more like the heat of a hand that hadn't been holding hers for a long time. Symbols ticked across its face and settled in a sigil she didn't know. A line crossed by another, like a tally where someone had forgotten whether they were counting up or down. The shadow under Elias thinned, not retreating, changing. It extended a narrow filament, a finger of dark that reached toward the blade at his hip as if to see its reflection. Liora moved without deciding. She stepped between the blade and the seeking dark and lifted her free hand, palm open. "Not yours," she said, to the market, to the thing that watched through its corners, to whatever counted debts with lamps and ash. "Not by this road." The filament paused. It tasted the air where her palm hung. Something like cold brushed her skin, though nothing touched it. Faye's staff tapped, once, twice, a rhythm that had never been a warning until it was. "Child," she said, too calm. "Step back." "Wait," Liora murmured. The coin warmed again. Steady, steady, as if lending backbone to her spine. "If it wants a price, I won't pay in him." The filament withdrew the width of a breath. The second shadow, she realized there were 2 now, reached instead for the empty chair. It found the place where a person should have been and drew a neat outline of a seated body on the stone. The outline sat very still. Leora's mouth went dry. "What is it doing?" "Practicing," Elias said. His voice had the same edge it carried near forgetting bells. "Setting a place. For who? For whoever can be made to sit." They edged forward. The chairs didn't turn. They didn't need to. The shadows adjusted, benign as cats, interested as tide. As Liora crossed between them, the coin cooled in a breath so sudden she winced. The tally-mark sigil on its face paused, then rotated a fraction, as if a clock had considered striking and decided against it. They cleared the corner. The lamplight returned to ordinary gold. People spoke in tones that sounded like regular voices again. A juggler dropped a knife and laughed. A trader cursed amiably and scooped spilled beans back into a sack. The world behaved, or wore behavior as a mask. "Why put chairs there?" Liora asked. "So you'll think the trap is a choice," Elias said. "Sit or don't sit. Ask or don't ask. Agree or disagree." He glanced back. "But the market is patient. If you won't sit, It will wait for someone you love to get tired. Faye had gone quiet in a way Liora disliked. Not anger, not fear. Accounting. It's testing edges, she said, where the light misses, where the rules can be leaned on. What rules? Liora asked. Faye looked at Elias, then at the sky that wasn't a sky. The ones that keep the collector from coming whenever he pleases. They stopped for tea, because Faye always stopped for tea. The way ships always mark the shoal they survived. The keeper poured without words. Liora drank without tasting. The cup's heat soaked into her fingers and could not make her hands warm. Elias, she said, when the keeper had gone to the back, when the shadow touched you, did it feel like anything? He took too long to answer, like remembering a promise you wish you hadn't made. What promise? He looked at her, then really looked, and Liora saw how tired he was behind his careful posture. The one I made to keep you from making mine. She didn't understand. She hated that she didn't understand. What does that even... A bell moved far away. Not a toll. A test strike. The lamps along the eaves shivered as if wind had been tied into their chains and tugged twice, just to see if they would hold. Faye stood. Time to go. They crossed the last square slow and open-eyed, as if speed offended the ground. A seller of trinkets sang a rhyme about luck. A woman counted coins that didn't match their faces. The violinist from the balcony had changed songs without pausing for breath. At the edge of the square, every lantern flared. Gold went white. Shadows burned to paper-thin silhouettes. All eyes turned upward because you always look at light when it behaves like that. For a heartbeat, a tall figure stood at the farthest reach of brightness. Cloak gray, still as iron. He was nothing more than the suggestion of height, and a blank where a face should be. And yet the market bent around him like iron fillings around a magnet. The air forgot to move. Then the lamps fell back to themselves. The figure was gone. No one screamed. No one ran. The market resumed the sentence it had been speaking. But Elias's hand had crushed the rim of his teacup into an ugly oval, and Liora realized she had stopped breathing and had to argue her body into starting again. Faye's voice was very even. We won't go home by any path we used to know. Was that... Liora began. Yes, Elias said. She waited for more. None came. Only the soft scrape of ash, very faint, where her step met stone. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The market had learned their shapes again tonight, measured them against its chairs and its bells, found them still fitting. And somewhere in the crowded distance, something patient rehearsed the exact moment it would ask them to sit.